moderate this panel. I think it's going to be quite interesting. So the other 380 eat your heart out. But so this is a panel that is going to talk about informing information with data analytics insights. And I understand it's a combined track. There are audience from the smart cities track. There are audience from the data analytics track, and this is an IoT conference. So there are three elements: IoT, data analytics, and smart cities. So I think it's quite interesting that we get to talk about all three together. So let me introduce myself. My name is Si Kyung. I'm from A-Star. I run the Urban Systems Initiative, which is the R&D program for smart cities. My background is data science, so I also do data analytics. And I do have a team on IoT. The team's name is called Sense and Sensibilities. They do sensor networking, but we call it Sense and Sensibility because in the end, the IoT or the sensors is supposed to generate data. So today's panel, I will quickly ask my distinguished panelists to give a quick introduction of themselves and what they do at the company. Please keep the advertising of your company short, and then I guess I will ask each of you to complete the one sentence. I'm here because I don't know why you guys are here, but anyway, so the audience would like to know the relevance of maybe your work or whatever with this panel. So before further ado, then maybe I'll start with Zack.
Hello, my name is Zack Wilson. I'm a Managing Director of Enlighted here in Southeast Asia. We are carrying a US-based technology brand that essentially introduces the Internet of Things to commercial real estate, which we feel is the most valuable fixed asset of humanity at this time. So I am here because I believe in the promise of being able to take a rich data set and apply it to large, high-value decisions that are being made every single day by C-level people, but are often done with poor information, incomplete data, and 100 or 200 years worth of sort of bad advice from the integrated facility management and brokerage market. So we're trying to end that. That's why I'm here.
Okay, thanks, Jack. And if you're not careful with Internet of Things, will be data rich, not data poor, but still information poor, right? Yeah. Next, we have Michael.
Okay, hello everyone. So I'm from Telenor Connection. Telenor Connection is part of Telenor Group, which is a Norwegian operator. We have about 180 million customers in Asia. Telenor Connection is a dedicated company to designing and operating connected devices throughout the world. I'm here to get to know more people in the industry, in the ecosystem, because that's the only way we're going to drive value out there to work together. That has been discussed earlier today. So to get to know more small and big players in this ecosystem.
Thank you, Michael. And last but not least, we have MK.
My name is MK. I'm part of the IBM Global Industry team, responsible for the Asia-Pac region. From an IBM context, I think we see IoT consist of three elements. One is what we have been committed and invest for the last 12 to 1 years on all the investment, creating all the platform and all this. But most important, we also see that it's about pulling all the data across different sources, across different industry together to create new possibility. And lastly, it's not just about IBM, it's about how we actually bring the ecosystem together, working with different companies. So that's also the reason I'm here, because I feel that we have to work together as a team, together as a partner to create what we call a new possibility with IoT.
Yeah. Thanks, MK. I like the term new possibilities. Is something we want to focus on today, which is about innovation. In fact, this morning when Minister Vivian gave a talk, the keynote, I remember he mentioned that it is not, although we are in IoT Asia, the conference about IoT, but it's not just about IoT, it's beyond IoT, and I think it's because it is about also a lot more about the data the IoT, the Internet of Things, will generate, and what we do with the data and how we use those data. And I also remember he says not just about productivity, it's not about just about cost saving, it's beyond this, and it's beyond creating new opportunities, and that is all about informing innovation with data analytics that generates from the IoT. So with that, let me pose the first question, I think, to motivate this panel. I will ask each of the panelists to give their so-called their favorite examples on how the use of data analytics insights or initiative in corporation has led to, has helped drive innovation and either created new services or improved the current services. So maybe I will let Michael start first.
Okay, there are many, and I would like to explain many of them because there are different rationale behind them. But I choose as example that I normally run when I'm out, which I like a lot myself. This is a basketball company that we worked with. I'm not a basketball player, so I'm not an expert in any way. But when started working with this company, they produced the basketball as lean as possible. They set up a distribution, heavily marketing, promoted it, sold it, and hoped not to see the customer again. Pretty standard setup for a product company. They had some innovative guys that are sitting down, so how could we reinvent, what could we do disruptive in our industry? So in the end, what came out is a basketball that looks exactly like any other basketball. It has the same dimension as any other basketball, same way it could be played professionally, but it is connected and it has lots of sensors. And with this basketball, it is a tool for practicing. So if I bounce too high, too low, too slow, it will give me feedback, and I will be compared through an app how I'm doing with others. I can get coaching tips, etc. I think this is a very disruptive change for that particular product. The challenge was not so much the technology, the challenge was on the business side. So before they sold a product, they never saw the customer, quite happy about that, until they have to sell them a new basketball. Now they get a continuing interaction, they get another way of supporting the customers because they were constantly on this app. They wanted feedback, they wanted upgrades, etc. But it also opened a totally new channel for them where they didn't have competition. So I think this is a very disruptive way where there was no competition in that area, and they opened up a totally new business for themselves.
MK, you have any favorite examples?
Maybe I feel that we should structure the thinking slightly a different way, because a lot of times if I go through many of the use cases, many of the customer conversation, I see that it always goes through 3 stages. And the first stages is about how I can leverage IoT to optimize my operation to reduce costs. That's always the immediate or the obvious use case that we have seen. One example is one of the consumer electronic company in Europe that supply all the aircon to all the residents area. So they spend a few $100 million just to service the customers. So with connected aircon, they start to see what is the exact problem with the aircon. So when they dispatch the service engineer to resolve or fix the problem, so immediately they know the engineer is fixing the right problem. They bring the right part to the customer's side so that they can actually make sure if the service call, I can close it. So that is what I call operation improvement, and that also helped to reduce significantly in terms of operation and of course inventory costs. So maybe first use case is really thinking along this line for most companies. As the companies start to gain operation efficiency, people start to think that, what can I do with my customers? How I can improve my customers' experience? So a classic example, we talk about many cases, connected car. So how can we improve the driver's experience with the car? We work with some of the French automotive company to saying that, okay, now combined with the weather data, the sensor that we collected, edge computing, how I can improve the driver experience in terms of safety and to the connected home and all these things. So it's getting all the sensors together, working, collaborating with each other. So as one of the use cases to give a different experience. I think this morning we talked about 6,000 or 8,000 sensors, but many people didn't realize that actually at any point in time, every second, there's 1,000 sensors talking to each other. So that is what I call a second stage of the evolution. And the third stage, once they have this new customer experience, new model, people start to think, what kind of business transformation I can get through? What kind of new business model I can actually create for my customers? So that's why that will actually start, the disruption start to comes in, to saying that I have my core competence, I know how to give a different experience to my customers, how I can disrupt the industry with a new business model. So for example, one Korean company that actually supply all the water filters, air filtration system to their customers. So the way they win the market is that I no longer sell you the devices, the appliance. I will list to you. You can consume on demand basis every month. Just pay me this small amount of data or small amount of fees. And on top of that, not only they occupy the big market share, they also have make sure they connect with the customers, make sure that the customer know that they know the part, when is part being consumed, how much water being consumed, what's their usage pattern, and of course, make sure that there's a service level. So this is what I call a third evolution, going into the business model transformation through data.
And Zach?
Yeah, one thing, I'm glad that you were actually able to sell to somewhat local with the Koreans, because a lot of examples we hear are the Europeans. Of course, the Europeans are taking the charge, leading it forward. America is a fast adopter. Even Canada and Mexico adopt these things very fast. How do you get a Southeast Asian customer to adopt this stuff and run with it? That's one question I'd like to pose. Second thing, so an example that I always like to tell, so because of the relevance of it right now, you know, Apple's building this giant spaceship shaped, I think it actually is a spaceship, they just haven't told us yet. So they're building this giant campus in Cupertino, and because of that they needed to acquire some adjacent real estate. So they happened to acquire a building that was occupied by someone who installed our sensors. 200,000 square feet got displaced. So obviously the brokers get excited. All the FM people, the CapEx companies are, oh, we're gonna make money, you know, Intel's moving 200,000 square feet, let's take it to the bank. So one of the facility management people who's familiar with our system and what it does started analyzing the data that we were collecting from the system based on about 1.5 million square feet that they had in the Bay Area. And they realized that they could absorb that entire 200,000 square feet into their existing real estate portfolio without taking an additional lease, without taking additional building project under their, you know, under charge. So the amount of savings that equated to, CapEx we set aside, $12 million a year in lease expense alone that they saved. Now that's enough to change a share price by a few %. So those are the things that I like to see with true, how are we getting actionable data or information, data, change the information and make a decision that has real dollar value, like really significant dollar value, and also changing the way that people do business. So when, instead of picking up the phone and calling a broker and saying, hey, I need 200,000 square feet, what's it gonna cost me? Thinking about how do we take the data we're collecting right now and see, do we even need 200,000 square feet? Because again, on a different bent, not IoT, but sustainability, the most sustainable building is the one that doesn't get built because it's not needed. So how much of the things that we're doing right now are just stinking thinking, and we need proper information to make better decisions. So I love that example.
Yeah. Actually, at this point, I want to remind everybody there's a pigeonhole that you can always post question. In fact, now I saw one question that is quite related to Michael, so I will just quickly pick that one out, and maybe Michael can answer that. Is it shown? Yeah. So the question is, what was the market perception of the new basketball launch together with the app, and what was the exact design of the business model pay-per-use?
I think this is very much in line with a lot of other things. So this didn't come out, it wasn't crystal clear from the beginning how it would look like. The market took it very well. Everyone thought it was good, but it's not really competing with existing line, because you don't buy plenty of these ones. They are fairly expensive. Now I don't remember the exact price, but I think they're about $150 US or something. There's a free app to it, and then you can buy, upgrade your app to earn for additional service if you want coaching tips, etc. There were different discussion how they should charge for this, or if they should charge at all. I think so far they're pretty happy with it. I think this is another example though of a small thing. It's not like the huge thing. It's not a revolutionary thing. But this is really showing disruptive, and I think this is what you can do in other areas.
Not to mention the blue sky associated with doing this for the brand. I mean, let's say it's X company, and they're the ones who are leading the charge, providing training techniques that have never been in the market. I mean, it's amazing just from a pure brand quality standpoint, right?
Yeah, but you had to be pretty bold to do that, because I mean they were really good in doing balls. So why would they do technology? Because they were already successful in their market, in their niche. But I agree. But that's where a lot of change came from. Maybe building a bit on that is how we actually see other more. If we're looking at in the industry, we actually see a more evolution. I remember working with as a consultant a long time ago, and then we were trying to get companies that were product oriented to build in service component into the business, and we all know how far that has come now. That was some 20 years ago, and I still think we are lacking in a lot of production companies to really have a true service element. Another of our customers just recently announced that they are not anymore a truck manufacturer, they are a service company. That's Scania, one of the biggest truck manufacturers in the world. They have had connectivity for quite some time in the trucks, but nowadays they provide a service. That's how they see themselves, rather than building trucks, because anyone can make those steel things, they say. I don't think anyone can, but they are Japanese and Chinese and everything. But I think it's a very mind shift change if you see yourself as a service company in an industry rather than a manufacturer. So those are pretty big shifts that will change also the business model, how they sell the services, etc. I built it into this question.
Well, maybe also like to comment. I think besides pay-per-use or just bundle all the price or cost into the basketball itself, I think there could be other new business models that can be created. So a company should also explore more than that. For example, a program-based or help program, or something like a training like what Zack just mentioned.
Thanks. So actually that leads to the next question I have. Michael, you mentioned a lot change, and actually innovation is about change. You also mentioned about the word evolution. So that's also change, but change in a slow and gentle way. And sometimes we may need a disruptive change that Zack has kind of, I think, mentioned in your question before. So a lot of this actually is about creating a new business model. I think the technology is there. Yet, I suppose the cost of technology is still not cheap. Change is not cheap, not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of effort and a lot of risk involved. So, so the question here is, what are the good and sustainable business model that are so-called that we should think about when with IoT and data analytics? In fact, I have one question from the audience here that I thought is very relevant to this. Is I mean, a lot of, I've mentioned in the beginning, I think some of you have mentioned, is a lot about the data being generated from the IoT. And what I suppose to have a sustainable business model then is about monetizing the data analytics profitability and, making companies pay for the analytics. I leave it to the panel to voice your thoughts about this.
Maybe just a really quick one, Michael. It's not so much that what companies will pay for it, it's how do you get to the person in the company who understands the value that you're giving them. Because selling that connected basketball to someone on the production line is not going to make sense. It had to be at the C-level or the head of R&D or somebody who actually is on the forefront of what is the athletic industry moving towards. So for us, it's, at some point we've got to have a sales shot at the C-level to really get buy-in, and then we can't get stuck in this sort of middle management purgatory where it's all about ROI and this and that, and we're going to validate your technology until you don't even believe in it anymore. It's ridiculous. So you need to have high level and then work your way through whatever corporate procurement. But at some point you need a champion at the C-level who gets it, who realizes that yes, if I do this, it's going to change my share price on my listed exchange, or it's going to significantly change my business model in a positive way. And once you get there, then the rest is, hopefully just planning a wedding that you're already engaged to. So that's.
No, I'm aligned with that, and I think Enlighted itself has a lot of interesting business models in the way pay-per-use, etc. I think the data analytics. I think stepping back a little bit from my perspective, it's that sensors are getting cheaper, connectivity is getting cheaper, and the user interfaces between machines or humans are getting a lot better. So the data has already been there. Now we're getting access to it, and once we're getting access to it, we can utilize it. And there is many ways with both like past data with present data where you predict and prescribe the future. But I would go back to Zack. What kind of value is it that we're getting out of it? I believe you still need to start walking before running. So I think a company starting with this have to look the easiest step, and that's a little bit to MK, start where we are. With my product, how do I make a service out of that? But that's also a challenge. Volvo Cars started to connect the cars from a safety perspective. So we started to connect them just from a safety. They are a safety brand, perceived to be the world leader safety. And we thought, okay, now they have this Volvo on call. If there is an accident, there will be an automatic channel. An operator will speak, are you all okay? If no one is responding, they will send an ambulance. And it's called the golden hour, because if you can get there within an hour, you save a lot of life. This Volvo thought was, wow, this is a really killer thing. But in the end, that's not why they have been successful with their connected cars. The reason why they're successful with the connected cars is actually that people are able to use their app to remotely turn on aircon or heating and see how the car is doing. That's the value they're driving. That's the data analytics that they're able to sell more cars based on that. So there are different drivers depending on. So it's not maybe the most obvious. So that's why you need the C-levels and some guts and trying, because it also will evolve. That's for sure.
Actually, I want to go on the opposite direction. Why do you want to start thinking of how do you monetize the data analytic profitability when you have the data? I thought you should be on the other side to look into what business you are trying to go in. What is a vision of the company? Like what Zack just mentioned, the stakeholder, the CEO need to have a direction. What kind of business you try to do? And then you work backward based on the business direction at different touch points, directly, indirectly, how you actually create more value out of this. And once you have the value, the cost become an easy question to answer. So it should be, the thinking should be going on the opposite. One example is maybe you just take Grab Taxi. Have Grab Taxi try to figure out how to get the taxi, how do they think of how to connect with the taxi, how to know which are the taxi movement, everything. They come up first with the vision of how do I bring all the taxis together to create a new service to all the passengers. And then they start looking at how do they connect with the taxi driver, the different other driver beyond that, the truck driver, and then how do they actually get all the connectivity, closer connection, so the data analytics comes after that. So I think the question of the way that how do we really create value, earn money out of data analytics is, first of all, we should look into the business case, the direction, then look into the data source. So that's the way I see it.
So your suggestion is start from the end and then go backwards. So maybe I ask a little bit different question. So let's talk about smart cities. So you talk about companies. From companies' perspective, it's a little bit straightforward. But for smart cities, you have the C-levels, typically start from the government, aspiring to be smart cities. So we put sensors, we talk about the connected lampposts and all this. And of course, the cities financing from taxpayers, the stakeholders are people, right? And these projects cost money, cost taxpayers money, and if it's, so one business model is, of course, the government provide all these and then forever and ever, and hopefully that is, somewhat the taxpayers will be happy about that. I kind of doubt so. So my question, and also this data and this infrastructure that is paid by the taxpayers could also benefit the companies, and then, but can it be, so we talk about open data, all this data is free to the company to exploit for commercial value. Is that a good business? Is that a justifiable cost? So I guess maybe I want to ask the panelists, in the smart city settings, you want to have IoT solutions and all these infrastructures. What is the, business model that make it sustainable? Not just a one-off test bed, and so on. So I would like to pick your brains on that. Michael, you are nodding, so you have some thoughts already.
I'm thinking. That's a bad habit. I don't have the answer, anything, but I think it's not that far. I mean, you have to find the return on investment in a value, and that value might not be money, but there needs to be a value in people wellness. I think, the minister explained that it's the people, it's the company, it's the politicians. The three of them have to work, and I think the Eindhoven minister said it very well. He preferred to work with partners that he could feel have a dialogue with to generate these values. And I think you can charge for it in different ways depending on what it is. Some of the things are charged for itself, where you're making a return on investment. There are evidence of this lighting area. Now I'm in a deep water here, but outside lighting, just by putting sensor and they are lighted when needed, and people and when they're connected, just the saving on electricity and maintenance is making up the business case itself. And there, all the players, the government, the companies, could chip in to make that sustainable. Because we have seen those business models where the connectivity provider, hardware, and the government all share the profit from that. That's totally different if you're looking at other areas. So Smart Nation is so big, so I think you have to pick areas by areas to find the business model.
Yeah, unfortunately, at such a grand scale as a city level, each city has its different social contracts that it has with its populace. I think we're very blessed in Singapore to have a social contract that's more about convenience than about safety anymore, right? But if you're in downtown Chicago, perhaps the IoT solution would be focused on safety, whereas here it might be, how long is my line at Changi Airport? So it's different, and the pain points and what people are going to get voted back into office based on are different. So to me, I don't want to get shot when I'm in Chicago. And when I'm in Singapore, I prefer to get some advice on where I can park and how quickly I can get to the airport and is the MRT on time. So it's completely different. Now, one is extremely trivial in a grand scale of life, but it's also very important when you're here. An hour and a half commute in the US is no big deal to me. But now my commute is 15 minutes. If it's 22 minutes, I'm really upset by the time I get to work. So it's all perspective, and I think that it takes very thought leaders like Vivian Balakrishna this morning who can kind of decipher that and crystallize from the populace what are the things that are important right now for this nation, and they have to respond. There's no simple solution. So
maybe I give a different point. Sorry, sounds like an opposition party here. So first of all, I want to highlight, just want to talk about budget, talk about cost. I think we also spoken about, a lot of people talk about getting the government to initiate this as a CapEx project and all these things. But bear in mind, smarter city is not about 100,000 devices. It's not about 1,000,000 devices. As everything get connected, we talk about 100 billion of devices or trillion of devices. And bear in mind, as all these devices start being monitored, start controlled, you have the firmware upgrade, you have the activities. So that's, besides for the government to start this initiative, I think they have to also bear in mind how do we sustain the model going forward. You don't want to have someone that can start, but subsequently, how do we operate? That also has to be go into a deep consideration. The CapEx, OpEx, the operating model, so that this is sustained over time. And maybe this is also not possible today. I think the way I see smarter city, the initiative going on is still very silo. So that's why this morning Dr. Vivian mentioned about the lamppost example. We have the security camera, we have all the light, and of course there are other devices. So you see that the lamppost start to have more and more devices. But what if these companies start to come together and work together? That will help to reduce the cost. At the same time, we also see that a lot of the companies also start to go into cross-industry boundary. Give for example, Samsung is also working with building developer, try to see how I can get a smarter building in place in Singapore. But instead of for the government try to initiate this, how can we tap this as one of the data source, getting the ecosystem to work, so that the system will become able to sustain by itself over time. And of course, there will be issue about interoperability and all these things, but this is something that where the technical team, the data analytics, the innovation can break through all these things. And as we have all these ecosystems start talking to each other, or what we call a system to system, I think that become more sustainable over time.
Comment again, sorry. Disagreeing with disagreeing. I think one of our experience is that seeing the big picture of the trillion devices and the 5-10 year plan is really hard to foresee. So our experience is to start with what we know, but at the same time being able to adapt down the road. Because people tend to wait for the next thing, and it's always going to be a better thing. So I think it's more about, you know, not locking one in, but start now and trialing it, because you're not going to fit the right business model or the right solution for whatever, if it's a smart city, if it's an AMR meter, whatever, that's going to change.
Yep. So I saw one question here that is quite interesting, so let me pick that out. So there's a question on analytics being backward looking, so, and how do you make the leap to future-oriented innovations? That's quite a controversial question. Any feedback on that?
I think that is really what the investment from IBM and our leadership team are also trying to look into. Yeah, to date, I think we are still looking at the analytics as really based on historical data and try to look forward. But as we learn all this pattern, that's why we are now talking about predictive, to predict what is the next thing to happen. And right now, the next direction for us to move on is to go into what we call a connective, so that based on all the pattern, now we start to create a new pattern out of the old pattern. And this is what we call a machine learning, a process, and understand the different reasons and possibility, and create what we call a new connective nature of IoT.
If I understand the question correct, maybe not. I think one thing that has been in the market for some time is the user-based insurance for car industry, which is using the analytics, and you're paying an insurance based on your driving behavior. So if you're speeding, you're going to get a higher premium, etc. That has been in the market for a good number of years. So of course that's using historical data, but I think what we're seeing now in those implementation is pay as you're driving is not based on your past data, but actually current data. So similar device that the Salesforce guys, OBD device in the car or similar, actually give you guidance while you're driving. So it will tell you there's an accident on this and this road, please take the other road. And based on how you're following those directions, your premium will vary. So I think that's how you're using historical data with present data, predicting things can happen and advise you to do different, and then monetize on it. And I can earn on it or I can lose on it.
Okay, so actually we have a few more minutes left. So on this question about analytics being backward looking and making the leap to future oriented innovation, I want to ask the panel my final question. So in fact, we were discussing before this discussion, this panel discussion off stage just now, and about our feeling about the show this year, how do we find it, and things like that. And personally, I feel that it's still a lot of promises, a lot of hype. I still feel that there's a lack of a real concrete case. My personal feeling is like what was said in the beginning, was quoted earlier, that it seems to me that IoT and even some of these data analytics is trying to use tomorrow's technology and solving yesterday's problem. So that is kind of my feeling, and I hope we can find tomorrow's problem, since we talk about future-oriented application, or at least we can try to find new, real concrete application that we can use this tomorrow's technology to solve today's problems. So I wonder if any thoughts from our panelists before we close the session.
I have just a few quick comments. So we do not just focus on this. We have other areas of interest that are sort of bleeding edge technologies, like open bath immersion data technology, cooling methods and such. And I always say, you know, if you're selling horses or bicycles, right? So a bicycle's operating cost is extremely low. A horse is a few $1,000s a year. So it seems to me it's easier to sell a horse that eats less grain than it is to sell a bicycle that does not require any at all. So at some point, these incremental things that we see downstairs are easier to sell than a completely new system. There's too much vested interest in status quo to completely upset the market, and that's what I'm constantly frustrated with. And I think sometimes why I ruffle feathers is because, you know, like I say, do you want to buy a horse that eats less grain, or do you want to buy a motorcycle that doesn't take grain at all and goes 30 times faster and runs for, you know, 40 years if you take care of it, not just 15? So it's like we have a bunch of horse riders out there, and we're trying to sell bicycles and motorcycles and, you know, hybrid cars, and they're just, we've always ridden a horse. That's what we do. Bessie's out back. Let's focus on something new, something that's controversial and sort of upsets the market. But the people who make the decisions, you know, they like Bessie out back. And the people who are making money off selling Bessie, they sure as heck don't want us to change that market. That's why downstairs we have IoT, which is BMS that's been around for 30 years. Or we have cloud services that's essentially the internet. I mean, it's the internet, guys. It's cloud servicing at some point. It's been around. So, you know, that's kind of my, I hate to throw up a sort of cynical outlook, but to me, yeah, maybe we should quit and just sell horses that eat less and drink less water.
Well, let's hope not. But Michael, I hope you have a more optimistic outlook.
I'm very optimistic. I think there is lots happening in the industry. Asia is fantastic. I mean, compared to Europe and US, you address opportunities with much more gut feeling. If you believe in it, you go for it. You want to make some trials and then you go for it, which I think is the perfect way of going. And I'm very, there is a lot of technologies coming, but the technology we have is really good. So it's all about the business mindset, getting the C-level people. But now it's getting to the C-level attention to actually look into it. There's a discussion if it's CTO or CMO or CXO's role, which I think is perfect because at least it reached that level. And then it's making sure it's good people there that you can discuss. Because there is good business value, but if you cannot prove there's a business value, you can talk about your hardware, your platform, doesn't mean anything. You have to prove a value, and if we cannot do that, we shouldn't be in the business.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to disagree?
Michael is my good friend. So whether it's a horse or a car, it doesn't matter. Most important, I'm thinking of what is the best way for me to get from point A to point B. So the gist of this is that what is the impact? What's the impact they're going to create to the society? What's the impact they're going to create to the home living style? What is the impact they're going to create to the people living in this city? I think that is more important thinking than what are the cool IoT device or apps I try to have. For the longest time, we've been talking in Japan, just for the company I'm working with, about creating a smart home in Japan. But after 2 years, you realize that it never take out. Because the Japanese will think that I have a comfort life, comfort living, what the value of the smart home will bring to me. But aging is a key issue in Japan. How do I spend or create a solution that help me to monitor and pay attention to the older people at home. That is a huge society problem that we need to resolve. So when you go into this impact, go into this direction of the value you want to bring to the people, you can see that the traction is very different. So I'm not trying to decide whether it's the horse or everything, but it's the purpose you are trying to build.
Thanks. So maybe I try to summarize what we talk about in this panel. I mean, it's about informing innovation with data analytics insights. So I repeat what Minister has said this morning is beyond, we must remember it's beyond the technology, beyond IoT. You know, we need to start thinking about the use case. MK, you mentioned we need to start from the end. What is really the use case? Because the technology is already there. So we must, you know, so whether it's a horse, basketball, smart home, we need to start from there and then see it has to be use driven, and then and while the cost of technology, maybe there's capex and there's opex, but we need to look into the right business model, and a lot of time we probably need to look at transformative use and maybe new services that the company or the organization can create. And I guess, you know, we are fortunate to have tomorrow's technology today, and it's really up to us to take advantage of that. And with that, I thank all of you for attending this panel. I hope you heard something useful. We'll be around tomorrow, today, I suppose. And please approach us if you have further questions. And I thank my panelists for the active discussion. Thank you very much.